Well, good morning. And yes, you are seeing me do this daily message today. By this time in the week, usually Ryan Driscoll is doing a couple of messages, but this week he is away at camp. And so I am doing all 5 daily messages for us this week, and I'm honored to get to do so. I hope that this is enjoyable to you, and we appreciate very much those of you who listen in to these daily messages. So we are continuing our walk with Jesus through the Gospel of Mark, and today we are in Mark chapter 6, and we're dealing with verses 14 through 29. Yesterday we had talked about how Jesus had sent out the 12, and that event, as it turns out, had a great ripple effect. Even so much so that King Herod had heard about it, and he knew that this Jesus was something very different than he had ever known of before. This Jesus wasn't like others who had claimed greatness in some way, only to fade away as time passed. But Jesus was doing things that could not be explained away. His ability to heal, his ability to cast out demons, and his ability to even commission his apostles to go out and do these things put Jesus in a whole new category. And so Herod was having to deal with this. When Herod heard about the things that Jesus was doing, he just kept saying, evidently to himself, maybe to others, he kept saying, "John, whom I beheaded, has risen from the dead." Evidently, Herod was feeling guilty about what he had done to John the Baptist. And, evidently, others were also feeling afraid. Some were seeing Jesus and they were saying, "John the Baptist has arisen from the dead, and that is why these miraculous powers are at work with him." And others were saying, "No, he is Elijah." And others, "He is a prophet, like one of the prophets of old." Well, all of these people, Herod and others, were looking for a reason why Jesus and his apostles were able to do what they were doing. And now these people were afraid that they had done something that was even against the will of God. Want to know a good lesson at this point? Guilt is a heavy load to bear. Well, at this point, King Herod is caused to remember what he had done exactly to John. John came preaching a message of repentance and of righteousness, and John had had the courage, the gall, if you will, to tell Herod that he had no right to marry his brother's wife as he had done. And that made the king mad. It also infuriated his wife. Her name was Herodias, interestingly, but his wife Herodias was evidently even more vengeful than King Herod was. Well, the day came for a great banquet to take place, a banquet celebrating the birthday of King Herod. And the daughter of Herodias danced in front of all of these guests. In a moment of poor judgment, again, Herod told the girl in front of all the guests that she could have anything she wished for, up to half of his kingdom. So this girl ran to her mother and asked her, "What shall I ask for?" This is where Herodias' vengefulness shows itself. She told the girl to go back and ask for the head of John the Baptist on a platter. At this point, John was simply held in prison. And the king evidently enjoyed listening to John preach. He enjoyed knowing about the things that he would say, even though he was upset with some of the teachings that he gave. But she told the mother of this girl, told her to go to the king and ask for the head of John the Baptist. So the girl went back and made that request. I want you to give me at once the head of John the Baptist on a platter. Well, the king didn't want to kill John, but because he had made this promise in front of all of the guests, he felt compelled to grant the request. So John was immediately beheaded. And now the guilt for that is coming back to haunt the king. There is so much to be learned here, looking at the behavior of sinful people and how that comes back to, in fact, plague them later in life. But I think for us today, there are two immediate lessons to be learned. Number one, poor choices nearly always lead to bad results. We see it in this case. We see it in other cases of stories in the Bible. But we see it every day in our lives as well. We know of poor choices that others make. We know the poor choices we make don't lead in good directions. And then secondly, a second lesson, trying to overcome the plan of God is a losing battle. It was God's plan that John would come preaching, that he would clear the way for the Messiah himself. It was then God's plan that this message would come from God himself through the Messiah to all mankind. And this message was indeed the gospel of Christ. It was the good news. And now Herod was evidently doing these things that were offensive to God and offensive to other people. You can't run away from God. Jonah tried. Others tried. But it comes down to this: God's will be done. What an amazing story we see here. What a gruesome, ugly, bloody, terrible story this is. And yet, that is the result of sin. Let's put our faith in the ultimate plan of God as he reveals it through the rest of this gospel. What a pleasure it is for us to walk with Jesus in doing this. I hope you have a good rest of your day. Bye for now.